Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I have this month's cards, tags, and more kit again, but this week I am going to be working on making some ATCs. I already have plans to use the gold foil transfer me's, or at least a few of the areas cut out. I've already cut down 4 ATC sized cards from that embossed flower paper, and I'm just rounding 2 of the corners. If you don't know, ATCs are 2.5 inches by 3.5 inches, so that's just what my cards are. And I didn't want 4 sharp corners. I don't know why. I didn't, but I didn't. And so now just the process of decorating them. It's really a rather quick and easy process. There aren't really any layers on here. I just cut out one section of those transfer me's, and I'm getting my stamp platform set up so I can stamp a different flower on each ATC from the newest Tim Holtz, well, one of the newer Tim Holtz stamp sets. Now, you don't have to do this because the transfer is clear everywhere that the gold foil isn't at, but I did want to just cut back some of that excess just because of the stamping, and it would act like a repellent, kind of like plastic, a thinner plastic or tape once it was on, and I didn't want too much variation from all of that, if that makes sense. Now, I didn't have to use my stamp platform for this. Well, like always, I was working on the fly, working as I was thinking as I went along. I never really have a clear-cut plan for what I'm doing, and it just worked out this way, kind of easier for me just to use the magnets just to hold those cards still. I do just push them down lightly, especially since it is on that embossed paper, just to make sure that the stickier side is down good before I get the backs wet and peel them off. I did use just a little sponge to help get the water around. I didn't want to get the embossed paper overly wet. I didn't want to have to wait for it to dry or anything like that. So I did use a sponge just to try to help me keep the water just over the transfers. That little makeup sponge also helped absorb any excess water, just so it wouldn't soak in around the edges. And since I wasn't really soaking that backing a whole lot, it did help make sure that I got any little pieces off. Little pieces of the back off, I should say. I just used, well, I started with washi tape on this first one just to try to cover a larger section of the transfers so that I wouldn't stamp across it. I really wanted to just keep the stamp like on the top and the bottom. I did, however, unfortunately discover that apparently even that washi tape was too sticky, so this first card has a little extra removed from it, and that's when I just decided I would just use a post-it that has even less tack on the sticky part. So I just cut down a strip of it, just enough to cover, I think it's a 1 inch or so section I have that I did not stamp on. With that little edge of the post-it, it did help hold it a little bit more, and it gave me something to stick at least one magnet on. This is a smaller black pigment ink. You could use, I don't remember, I think it's Color Box, but it is a pigment ink, and it was because I did not realize that both my StazOn and my archival ink were both dried out, well, mostly dried out, and I need to re-ink them. Fortunately, I had a few backup plans of some other black pigment inks to use. I sprayed all of my cards with some workable fixative before this next part, and I do eyeball realign the stamps because I didn't necessarily care if the Distress Oxides were exactly lined up, which is why I didn't do them right after stamping with the black ink. If they were a little off, it didn't matter to me. It just adds more visual interest. So I just picked out 4 different Distress Oxides, inked up my stamp again, stamped on top where I had kind of eyeballed for them to go. Because the Distress Oxide is water reactive and not necessarily going to adhere to those transfers as well as a pigment ink, that is the reason that I had sprayed everything with my workable fixative, just to give a little bit extra hold for the oxides to go on, and to add a little bit of protection, just so they wouldn't soak in to the craft stock when I watered them down. The 4 inks I used, that first one there was a fossilized amber. This second ATC was done with wilted violet. The third one is in kitsch flamingo. And the 4th and final one was done with prize ribbon. Then I just sprinkled on, well, large dropped water, spritzed on some water. Used my whole paper towel roll just to roll across initially after I let it sit for a few seconds, just to get that oxide to really activate. And after everything had dried, I sealed up my cards with more workable fixative so that it wouldn't smear off on my hands, or I wouldn't accidentally reactivate it, and gave me just another layer to work with, or to work on, to layer up on, because I do come in and just add the inks around the edges and fill in the bit of the petals at the top and the bottom above the gold foil transformies. I spritz on some more water. I really let the brushed on inks pool up and move around, and I have my heat. I use my heat gun, but I use it on low heat because of those because of the transformies on there. I wanted to dry some of the larger splotches before removing the excess water. I dried them a little, I removed the excess water, and then I sprayed them again just to have different areas activate, the different areas of that oxide activate or pool up. And then again, I'm using low heat and just trying to get my oxides at least mostly dry. I do let them finish air drying, but I do want to get it mostly dry. Now, I could have gone and sprayed some more workable fixative on, but I wanted to use my my microglaze. This is some Judikins microglaze, and I just used my finger, rubbed it on. It also kind of reactivates the Distress Oxide, plus the rubbing also kind of blends it around a little bit, if that makes sense. And because it's a wax, it's still going to have that water repellency on it. And I thought that the wax would just be a better match for the plastic-ish, the kind of like plastic filmy excess from the transformies. After I had a good layer of that microglaze on, I just used a paper towel kind of to polish it up, just give it a little bit of a buff and make sure that it was rubbed on good, and I had a smooth surface worked in there, or worked on there. My bases are complete now, so I'm just going to, I just go through and I pick out the pop out pieces that I want to use. I use 2 butterflies and 2 dragonflies on mine. I shape the wings of them a little bit just to give a little bit extra dimension. I didn't necessarily want them on there flat, or even just to look flat. I picked out 4 of the smaller flowers from the pop out sheet to use as another layer on my ATCs. I have this spool of, it's a variegated pastel thread, and I thought it would go good with the Distress Oxides instead of just a white thread or a thread that matched. It adds all of the colors now to each of my ATCs. So I just start randomly piling up, making a big old mess of some piles of that thread, and using my hot glue gun, I stack everything together. I glue my butterflies and my dragonflies down as my first layer. I add the little rat's nest of thread. I separate the petals on the flowers just a little bit so that I can curl them up and give them a little more dimension, and then add them to the top of everything. So it goes my ATC base, my butterfly or dragonfly, the little rat's nest of the thread, and then the flower. And that's all there is to it. 4 ATCs, relatively quick and easy, just using some inks and threads and stamps from my stash. I hope that you enjoyed this project and it gave you some ideas of what you can make using this month's Cards, Tags, and More kit. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications if you haven't already. Give us a thumbs up and feel free to share this video. Thank you, and I will see you again next week.